Hey guys, today we are going to be picking up our discussion of the period between the Zhao and the Qin dynasties. The first half of it we talked about last week in class. That was the spring and fall period, and that was the time when the Zhao Empire collapsed on itself, the Western Zhao did, and the emperor was resigned to kind of a puppet figure. He didn't have much actual power at the time, and the kingdom broke apart into literal hundreds of small kingdoms. Anyone who had the money or the power to get an army together did, and they started trying to carve out their own kingdoms in what once was this massive Chinese Zhao Empire. And that is what was happening in the first part. There was a lot of philosophy. There was a lot of great thinkers at the time who wanted to try and find ways to bring China back to dominance through philosophical means. But now we are in the Warring States period. This is the second half of the same period in between the Zhao and the Qin. And it's when, even though it's not as bloody because of all the small kingdoms fighting each other, there are bigger powers at this time who are fighting each other, trying to become the one supreme power in the area. That's going to be the focus of the lesson today. So, I'm going to start by looking at a map right here. You can see how we have this big green area is what China is today, but this area right here is what China was when the Zhao collapsed. And so these kingdoms right here are the ones that are going to be the big focus of the Warring States period. They consolidated together from combining sometimes dozens of these smaller kingdoms that we saw in the spring and fall period into these bigger powers. And there's less fighting during this time just because there are less powers to be fighting, but generally they are on bigger scales, these battles, these power conflicts, and just a lot of politics, a lot of wars, and just a lot of things going on under the surface that are betrayed by the name of the Warring States period, because the Warring States period was actually more peaceful than the spring and autumn period, which is really, really confusing. Okay, and then next, so remember that during the spring and autumn period, a lot of those kingdoms we were talking about were actually just provinces of the Zhao Emperor, the Western Zhao. The Eastern collapsed hundreds of years earlier. And so when the Zhao, though, was put into the position of a puppet king, a lot of the regional rulers, known as the dukes, started disrespecting the emperor and gaining more power for themselves, with the eventual goal of wanting to become powerful enough that they became the emperor. And so that's when they started gobbling up the smaller kingdoms, which were still provinces at the time. But when we got to the point of the 7 kingdoms that are the real key players in the Warring States period, they were actual kingdoms. They called themselves king. They had the mandate of heaven as their divine right to rule in these kingdoms, and they all thought that they should be the emperor of all of China at this time. And so the one that actually ended up winning this battle, spoiler alert, is the Qin Empire. So we can see them right over here to the side, and you can also see all of this area down here, the lighter green, is areas that they conquered before they managed to conquer the other main kingdoms here. And so they were a really powerful kingdom, even though there were all of these other real kingdoms here to fight against them. They had more men, they had more money, and they were really, really scary for these other kingdoms who still wanted to be in control. And so there were 2 different approaches to how these kingdoms chose to fight against the Qin. There was what was called the Vertical Alliance, Hezong, and it meant these kingdoms in a vertical line here would band together to fight against the Qin collectively, knock the Qin down a peg, and then everyone divides the spoils equally and duke it out between the 6 kingdoms that would be left. And not many kingdoms actually tried this. A lot of them talked about it, but no one wanted to compromise their own position to one of their neighbors in order to take out the Qin. And the much more popular version was the Horizontal Alliance, the Lianheng, in which they would work with the Qin and try and get the spoils of a completely conquered China. All right, and then we're going to make a quick break for a group discussion. Everyone break into groups of about 3 to 4 and discuss some of the differences between the spring and fall period and the warring stage period. Once we come back together, we're going to call on a few students from different groups just to share some things and see if there are any questions or any cool insights that they had to share.